Tutankhamun, more commonly known as King Tut, stands as one of the most iconic figures in the history of ancient Egypt. Born around 1341 BC in the city of Amarna, his life and reign were marked by religious upheaval, dynastic conflict, and personal tragedy. His name, which translates to the living image of Amun, reflects the major religious transition that defined his short life, as he shifted the kingdom away from the monotheistic revolution initiated by his father, Akhenaten, and reinstated Egypt's traditional polytheism. Tutankhamun's story is not one of personal power or military conquest, but rather a narrative shaped by the ambitions of those around him and the legacy of a dynasty struggling to recover from radical religious reforms. His brief reign lasted from roughly 1332 BC to 1323 BC, beginning when he was just a child and ending with his death at the age of 19. Yet it is not his life that first captivated the modern world, but rather the discovery of his near-intact tomb in 1922 AD by British archaeologist Howard Carter, an event hailed as the greatest archaeological discovery of the 20th century. That discovery brought the name of a relatively minor pharaoh to international fame and has continued to inspire fascination and scholarly debate for over a century. Tutankhamun was born during one of the most tumultuous times in ancient Egyptian history. His father, Pharaoh Akhenaten, had upended centuries of religious tradition by abandoning the worship of a multitude of gods in favor of a singular deity, Aten, the sun disk. This radical monotheistic shift came with massive political and cultural consequences. Temples were closed or repurposed, statues of traditional gods were defaced, and a new capital city, Akhetaten, modern-day Amarna, was constructed to serve as the center of this religious revolution. Akhenaten's actions destabilized the religious institutions of Egypt, alienated the powerful priesthood of Amun, and weakened diplomatic ties with neighboring regions. Born into this environment of chaos and reform, Tutankhamun was originally named Tutankhaten, which means living image of Aten, to honor the god his father had elevated above all others. His mother, long thought to be Queen Nefertiti, was later confirmed through DNA analysis to be Akhenaten's own sister, known only to us as the Younger Lady. This incestuous union resulted in a child plagued by significant genetic defects. Tutankhamun suffered from multiple congenital disorders, including a cleft palate, scoliosis, and a clubfoot that made walking difficult, if not painful. Despite his physical limitations, Tutankhamun ascended to the throne at the tender age of 9 or 10, likely under the guidance and manipulation of powerful court officials. Chief among these was Grand Vizier I, a seasoned advisor who had also served under Akhenaten, and General Horemheb, a military commander who held considerable influence over the army. These men essentially ruled Egypt in Tutankhamun's name, shaping national policy and guiding the kingdom through a period of restoration and reformation. One of the most significant decisions made during this time was the rejection of Atenism and the reinstatement of the traditional Egyptian pantheon, particularly the worship of Amun. To reflect this religious pivot, the young pharaoh changed his name from Tutankhaten to Tutankhamun, signaling a return to the old gods and a symbolic severing of ties with his father's legacy. The capital city was moved from Amarna back to Thebes, the temples of Amun and other deities were reopened and restored, and the displaced priesthood was reinstalled in their former positions of power and prestige. The years of Tutankhamun's reign were thus focused on rebuilding Egypt, spiritually, politically, and structurally. Temples that had been desecrated or neglected during Akhenaten's rule were reconstructed and rededicated. The pharaoh's restoration stela, which was placed in front of the Karnak temple in Thebes, vividly describes the state of ruin left by his father's policies and outlines Tutankhamun's commitment to re-establishing divine favor through ritual, ceremony, and architecture. The stela notes that the gods had turned away from Egypt during Akhenaten's time and that the land had fallen into disarray. Through the re-establishment of proper religious practices, it was believed that the gods would once again smile upon Egypt, bringing prosperity and peace. But restoration was not limited to domestic affairs. Internationally, Egypt had lost much of its influence under Akhenaten, who had largely ignored foreign policy in favor of theological matters. During Tutankhamun's reign, efforts were made to repair diplomatic relationships with neighboring powers such as Mitanni, Assyria, and Babylonia. Gifts were exchanged, ambassadors were received, and Egypt once again projected strength on the international stage. Though weak and physically impaired, Tutankhamun sought to fulfill the traditional roles of a pharaoh as warrior and leader. Among the many treasures found in his tomb were military chariots, bows, and even body armor, suggesting he may have participated in ceremonial hunts or even military campaigns. Some Egyptologists speculate that he may have led troops into battle toward the end of his reign, particularly in conflicts against the Nubians to the south or the Syrians to the north, though there is no definitive evidence to support this. What is clear, however, is that his health continued to deteriorate, likely worsened by an infected broken leg and malaria, both of which contributed to his untimely death around the age of 19. There has been much speculation over the years regarding the cause of his death, including theories of assassination, political intrigue, and even curses, but modern forensic analysis suggests that his death was most likely natural, if tragically premature. His burial was rushed and somewhat modest by royal standards, further suggesting that his death was sudden and unexpected. Tutankhamun's death marked not only the end of a reign but also the end of a dynastic line. He left no surviving heirs, despite being married to his half-sister, Ankhesenamun, who herself was a daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. 2 mummified stillborn daughters were found in his tomb, a tragic reminder of the health issues likely stemming from generations of royal incest. After Tutankhamun's death, Grand Vizier I seized the throne and married Ankhesenamun, cementing his claim to power. However, I's rule was brief, and he was soon succeeded by Horemheb, who undertook a campaign to erase the memory of both Akhenaten and Tutankhamun from the historical record. Their names were omitted from king lists, their monuments were defaced or dismantled, and their contributions were deliberately forgotten. This deliberate erasure was so successful that by the time of the New Kingdom's decline, Tutankhamun had become a footnote in Egyptian history, his tomb left untouched, his name unspoken, his story lost. But history had other plans. More than 3,000 years after his death, Tutankhamun would rise again, not in body, but in memory, thanks to the tireless efforts of Howard Carter and his benefactor, Lord Carnarvon. In the early 20th century, the Valley of the Kings had already yielded many treasures, but most experts believed it had given up all its secrets. Carter, however, remained convinced that one final royal tomb lay hidden beneath the sands, one that had escaped looters and time alike. After years of fruitless searching and dwindling funds, Carter's persistence paid off. On November 4, 1922, his team uncovered a set of steps leading to a sealed doorway. Behind that door lay a tomb untouched by time, filled with a treasure trove of artifacts that would captivate the world and revive interest in ancient Egypt. Carter's discovery not only shed light on the life of a forgotten boy king but also sparked a global phenomenon that came to be known as Tutmania. The moment Howard Carter opened the sealed doorway to Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, the ancient world came alive once more. What lay beyond that threshold was unlike anything archaeologists had ever seen. Carter later described that moment with reverence and awe, stating, "As my eyes grew accustomed to the light, details of the room within emerged slowly from the mist. Strange animals, statues, and gold, everywhere the glint of gold." The tomb was modest in size compared to those of more prominent pharaohs but was astonishing in the quantity and quality of artifacts it held. Over 5,000 items were meticulously catalogued by Carter and his team, a process that took nearly a decade. Among the treasures were gilded shrines, ceremonial beds, chariots, alabaster jars, ritual items, weapons, jewelry, statues, musical instruments, and an array of personal belongings. Every object provided a window into the life, beliefs, and daily practices of a young king whose reign had been all but erased from history. The very existence of the tomb, untouched for millennia, was an archaeological miracle, a snapshot of ancient Egyptian civilization frozen in time. The discovery also led to widespread rumors of a so-called curse of the pharaoh, particularly after Lord Carnarvon, the expedition's financial backer, died shortly after entering the tomb. Media outlets sensationalized the event, claiming that an ancient curse had been unleashed upon those who dared disturb the pharaoh's resting place. Though scientists and historians have dismissed these claims as superstition and coincidence, the idea of the curse took hold in the public imagination and only added to the mystique surrounding Tutankhamun. Over time, several other members of the excavation team and visitors associated with the tomb died under what some considered suspicious or unexplained circumstances, further fueling the legend. Whether real or imagined, the curse contributed to the global fascination with ancient Egypt and ensured that Tutankhamun would not be forgotten again. Museums around the world began showcasing Egyptian artifacts, and King Tut's treasures toured globally, drawing millions of visitors and elevating the boy king to the status of a cultural icon. Among the most iconic items found in the tomb was the golden funerary mask that encased Tutankhamun's mummified head. The mask, made of solid gold and inlaid with lapis lazuli, obsidian, and colored glass, depicted the pharaoh as the god Osiris, ruler of the underworld. It remains one of the most recognizable artifacts from the ancient world. The mask wasn't just a display of wealth, it held spiritual significance. It was meant to protect the king's soul in the afterlife and ensure his rebirth. Another extraordinary item discovered was an iron dagger with a blade made from meteorite metal, an incredibly rare material in ancient times. Analysis confirmed that the iron used in the dagger came from a meteorite, making it a celestial weapon, possibly considered magical or divine by ancient Egyptians. The craftsmanship of this dagger surpassed that of other items made from meteoric iron found in the tomb, such as miniature blades and amulets, suggesting that it held special significance, perhaps reserved for the pharaoh's journey in the afterlife. Other fascinating objects from the tomb include a ceremonial ostrich feather fan, whose handle was made of gold and topped with a semicircular palm meant to support 30 ostrich feathers. The embossed design on the fan shows Tutankhamun hunting ostriches in the eastern desert near Heliopolis, while the reverse side depicts him returning triumphantly with his prey. This fan not only demonstrates the king's participation in royal hunts but also serves as a symbol of power and divine authority. Several pieces of furniture were also discovered, including a ceremonial leopard skin cloak, ritual beds shaped like sacred animals, and intricately carved thrones. One of the thrones depicted a tender domestic scene. Tutankhamun seated while his queen, Ankhesenamun, anoints him with perfume. This rare portrayal of intimacy in ancient Egyptian art offers insight into their relationship and humanizes the young couple beyond the usual formalities of royal imagery. Game boards, wine jars, cosmetic containers, and even food offerings were placed in the tomb, all intended to serve the king in the afterlife. Tutankhamun's burial, however, reveals much about the chaos surrounding his death. Unlike the grand tombs constructed for more prominent pharaohs, his was relatively small and hastily prepared, indicating that his death may have been sudden and unexpected. Some walls were painted in a rush, and there is evidence that some artifacts, including his coffin, may have been originally made for someone else. The tomb's location in a low-lying area of the Valley of the Kings likely contributed to its preservation. Over the centuries, debris from flash floods covered the entrance, protecting it from grave robbers. While most royal tombs were looted in antiquity, Tutankhamun's remained mostly intact, though there is evidence of a minor break-in shortly after his burial. Ancient officials resealed the tomb before significant damage or theft could occur. This fortunate sequence of events allowed his treasures to survive for more than 3,000 years, offering an unparalleled look into Egypt's New Kingdom era and the personal life of a pharaoh long lost to memory. The revelation of Tutankhamun's genetic background in the 21st century added further layers to the understanding of his life and ailments. A comprehensive DNA analysis conducted in 2010 by Egyptian scientists and international researchers confirmed that Tutankhamun was the child of a brother-sister union. His father was indeed Akhenaten, and his mother was one of Akhenaten's sisters, known only by the tomb designation, KV35YL, the Younger Lady. This level of inbreeding was not uncommon in royal families, who believed in maintaining a divine bloodline by marrying within the family. However, the genetic consequences were severe. Tutankhamun likely suffered from a range of inherited conditions, including a cleft palate, scoliosis, and necrosis of the foot bones, particularly in his left foot, where a clubfoot made walking difficult. CT scans of his mummy also revealed that he had a broken femur just before death, which, combined with a severe malaria infection, most likely led to his demise. These findings debunked older theories of murder and painted a picture of a fragile young man, more a symbol than a sovereign. Despite his health issues, Tutankhamun's reign was not devoid of accomplishment. Under his name, Egypt regained much of its former religious and political structure. His re-establishment of the cult of Amun and the priesthood revitalized Egypt's spiritual framework. His advisors, Ai and Horemheb, used his image and authority to legitimize reforms and stabilize the country after years of chaos under Akhenaten. Large-scale building projects resumed, including the rebuilding of temples, commissioning of statues, and reoccupation of Thebes as a religious center. Inscriptions from his reign emphasize piety, restoration, and harmony. His restoration stela, a key document from his era, described the land as neglected and the gods as abandoned during the previous reign. Under Tutankhamun, divine order, or Ma'at, was to be restored. These acts earned him posthumous recognition among later generations, even if his name was eventually erased. For a short while, he was seen as a restorer of balance, a bridge between the chaos of Adonism and the golden age of Egypt's 18th dynasty. The political maneuvering following his death further underlines the importance of his reign as a transitional period. Grand Vizier I, who had held immense influence during Tutankhamun's lifetime, declared himself pharaoh and married the boy king's widow, Ankhesenamun. However, records indicate that Ankhesenamun may have sought foreign help to avoid this forced marriage, possibly appealing to the Hittite Empire to send her a royal husband. This unprecedented move was likely born out of desperation and fear, as marrying a foreigner would have been unthinkable in Egyptian royal tradition. The Hittites did send a prince named Zananza, but he was killed en route under mysterious circumstances, possibly by agents loyal to Ai or Horemheb. Ai's reign was short-lived, and he was eventually succeeded by Horemheb, who had no royal blood but claimed legitimacy through his military prowess and connection to Tutankhamun's court. Horemheb initiated a campaign to purge the memory of Akhenaten, Smenkhkare, Tutankhamun, and Ai from official records, positioning himself as the true restorer of Egypt. Though Tutankhamun's legacy was deliberately erased in the years following his death, the tomb's discovery centuries later ensured that he would become the most famous pharaoh of all time. Ironically, it was the act of forgetting him that preserved his memory. Had his name not been removed from inscriptions, his tomb may have been targeted by looters like so many others. The erasure ensured the secrecy that led to its preservation. In death, he achieved what many powerful rulers of antiquity could not: immortality through rediscovery. His story, once hidden beneath the sands of the Valley of the Kings, now serves as a testament to ancient Egypt's complexity, grandeur, and the enduring power of archaeology. His image, adorned in gold and wrapped in the symbols of gods, as one of the most recognizable icons in the world, embodying the mysteries of a civilization that still captures the imagination of millions. The fragile boy who walked with a cane now stands at the pinnacle of historical renown, his name echoing through the corridors of museums, textbooks, and the dreams of those who still seek to uncover the past. The reign of Tutankhamun was characterized not by dominance or conquest, but by transition and recovery. His advisors, Ai and Horemheb, acted as regents in all but name, effectively governing Egypt while Tutankhamun served as the symbolic head of state. This power dynamic was not uncommon in pharaonic rule when child kings were crowned. However, what sets this period apart is the underlying urgency to reverse the theological and political damage done during Akhenaten's monotheistic revolution. Tutankhamun, perhaps unknowingly, became the face of a counter-revolution, a return to normalcy in a nation whose identity had been fundamentally shaken. The priests of Amun were reinstated, temple economies were revived, and traditional festivals resumed. All of these efforts were designed not only to appease the gods but also to re-establish Egypt's national morale. For the people of Egypt, the restoration of polytheism wasn't just a religious act, it was a reclaiming of their cultural soul. Among the numerous temples that benefited from restoration were Karnak and Luxor, both vital religious centers for the worship of Amun. The rebuilding of these sacred sites was more than symbolic, it was an economic stimulus that provided jobs and renewed a sense of order. Craftsmen, laborers, priests, and scribes all found purpose again under this religious renaissance. Artistic expression, which had been rigid and abstract under Akhenaten's Amarna art style, returned to its classical form. Scenes once again depicted pharaohs in strong, idealized poses and gods in their traditional anthropomorphic forms. Wall paintings, statues, and carvings from Tutankhamun's reign show an intentional return to familiar styles, with vibrant colors and harmonious compositions. The tombs of nobles and officials also reflected this shift, mirroring the return to stability. It was as if the entire kingdom breathed a collective sigh of relief, with Tutankhamun as the figurehead of this cultural resurgence. Tutankhamun's marriage to Ankhesenamun was not only a familial union but also a political necessity. As the daughter of Nefertiti and Akhenaten, Ankhesenamun had significant symbolic importance in legitimizing Tutankhamun's reign. Their marriage consolidated royal bloodlines and reassured the population that the 18th dynasty remained intact despite the disruptions of Akhenaten's heresy. However, their union did not produce a living heir, which would prove to be a critical vulnerability in the dynastic succession. The discovery of two mummified fetuses in Tutankhamun's tomb is perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of their marriage, reflecting the genetic weaknesses inherited through generations of incestuous unions. One of the fetuses was prematurely born at approximately 5 months gestation, and the other closer to full term. DNA analysis confirmed that both were daughters of Tutankhamun and Ankhesenamun. The preservation of these fetuses in his tomb suggests that they were considered part of his royal legacy and intended to accompany him into the afterlife, possibly with hopes of rebirth in the divine realm. The lack of an heir created a power vacuum upon Tutankhamun's death. In a society where the continuity of divine kingship was essential for national stability, this absence opened the door for court officials to seize power. Grand Vizier I, who had been a close advisor to both Akhenaten and Tutankhamun, swiftly declared himself pharaoh. To solidify his claim, he married Ankhesenamun, effectively usurping her royal lineage to legitimize his throne. Historical records suggest that Ankhesenamun was deeply opposed to this union. One of the most fascinating yet tragic historical episodes stems from a letter written by an Egyptian queen, believed to be Ankhesenamun, to the Hittite king Suppiluliuma I. In the letter, she begged for one of his sons to come to Egypt and marry her, promising to make him king. She emphasized that she was a widow and did not want to marry a servant, presumably I. This plea shocked the Hittite court, as it was unheard of for an Egyptian queen to request a foreign husband. The Hittite king agreed and sent his son, Prince Zananza, but the young man was assassinated before reaching Egypt. The political intrigue surrounding this incident suggests deep factionalism and perhaps even internal conspiracies designed to prevent foreign influence over Egypt's throne. Following I's short reign, Horemheb, once designated as Tutankhamun's successor, took control of Egypt. As a military general with no royal blood, Horemheb presented himself as a restorer of divine order and justice. He launched an aggressive campaign to obliterate the legacies of Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, and I, erasing their names from monuments and excluding them from king lists. In their place, Horemheb emphasized his own authority and contributions. Ironically, much of what is known about Tutankhamun today is due to the discovery of his tomb rather than any inscriptions or monuments left behind. Horemheb's attempt at historical erasure was nearly successful. Without the tomb, Tutankhamun would likely have remained a historical mystery, his name lost to the sands like countless others. Horemheb also instituted significant legal and administrative reforms, stabilizing Egypt and preparing the way for the 19th dynasty. By appointing his own successor, Paramessu, who became Ramesses I, Horemheb laid the foundation for the Ramesside era, one of the most illustrious periods in Egyptian history, producing rulers like Seti I and the great Ramesses II. The irony of Tutankhamun's fame lies in the fact that he was likely considered an insignificant ruler during and after his time. He left behind no grand temples, no sweeping military victories, and no profound religious doctrines of his own. His accomplishments were largely the work of others, and his role was that of a passive figurehead in a larger political and religious drama. And yet, the untouched state of his tomb elevated him to a level of posthumous glory unmatched by even the greatest pharaohs. The tomb became a time capsule of ancient Egypt, preserving not only the riches of a king but also the belief systems, artistic achievements, and daily life of an entire civilization. It offered scholars an unparalleled opportunity to study everything from mummification techniques to ritualistic objects, tools, and cosmetics. The magnitude of this discovery redefined Egyptology and sparked an enduring global fascination with the boy king. Entire museum wings, academic departments, films, documentaries, and exhibitions owe their existence to the legacy of Tutankhamun's tomb. The fascination with Tutankhamun also reawakened interest in the broader historical context of the Amarna period. Akhenaten, long vilified as a heretic, became a subject of scholarly curiosity and reinterpretation. Some modern scholars regard him as a revolutionary thinker who challenged the status quo and experimented with a unique form of monotheism centuries before such concepts took hold elsewhere. Nefertiti, whose beauty and power captivated artists during her time, has been re-examined not just as a consort but as a co-regent and possibly a ruler in her own right. Even Ankhesenamun, whose tragic life has been overshadowed by those around her, is now recognized as a key political player in a time of dynastic upheaval. The rediscovery of Tutankhamun inadvertently pulled these figures back into historical light, allowing for a more nuanced understanding of one of the most complex and controversial eras in ancient Egyptian history. Modern technology has continued to reveal new insights about Tutankhamun and his time. High-resolution CT scans, DNA testing, 3D imaging, and digital reconstructions have not only clarified medical conditions and lineage but also enabled researchers to recreate the boy king's physical appearance with startling accuracy. These advancements have helped dispel myths and correct inaccuracies perpetuated in earlier scholarship. For example, the theory that Tutankhamun was murdered by a blow to the head was disproven after scans revealed that the skull damage occurred post-mortem, likely caused by embalmers or early archaeologists. Similarly, questions about his deformities and illnesses have shifted the narrative from one of sensationalism to medical realism. Today, Tutankhamun is not just viewed as a glittering icon but as a fragile human being, shaped by divine expectations, political currents, and personal suffering. His story resonates not just because of its opulence, but because of its humanity. He is remembered not merely as a king, but as a boy caught in the crosscurrents of history. Tutankhamun's tomb also raised important questions about the ethics of archaeology and the preservation of cultural heritage. In the decades following Carter's discovery, artifacts were removed, studied, and distributed around the world. While this dissemination helped educate the public and fund further research, it also sparked debates about ownership and repatriation. Egypt, in recent years, has demanded the return of several key artifacts, arguing that they are national treasures that belong in their place of origin. Some institutions have complied, while others argue that their possession ensures the artifacts' safety and global accessibility. These debates are ongoing and reflect broader tensions in the fields of archaeology, museum studies, and post-colonial ethics. Tutankhamun's legacy, therefore, continues to influence not only historical scholarship but also the way societies understand and manage their shared past. His tomb, once a resting place sealed in silence, now speaks to issues of identity, justice, and memory. The global impact of the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb was immediate and unprecedented. Newspapers around the world covered every detail of the excavation, and Howard Carter became a household name. Tutmania swept across Europe and the United States, influencing everything from fashion to film, design to decor. Jewelry mimicked Egyptian motifs. Women styled their hair in Nefertiti fashion, and scarabs, ankhs, and lotus symbols appeared on clothing and accessories. Egyptomania was not new. It had followed Napoleon's campaigns in Egypt over a century earlier, but this was different. This time, it was fueled by real gold, photographs of untouched tombs, mysterious inscriptions, and an enigmatic boy king who seemed to rise from the dead. The sheer glamour of the discovery caught the imagination of a post-World War I generation yearning for wonder and mystery. Tutankhamun, barely a footnote in history before 1922, was now the face of an entire civilization, an ambassador of the ancient world to the modern one. Museums soon joined the frenzy. Artifacts from Tutankhamun's tomb began to tour internationally, drawing millions of visitors and becoming some of the most viewed exhibitions in history. The Egyptian Museum in Cairo became a pilgrimage site for tourists and scholars alike. The 1970s global tour of the Treasures of Tutankhamun was a cultural phenomenon, breaking attendance records in London, Paris, Tokyo, and several U.S. cities. For many people, these exhibits were their first close encounter with ancient history, and the dazzling gold mask, the chariots, the alabaster jars, and the intricately painted coffins left a lasting impression. Academic interest surged as well. Universities expanded Egyptology departments, and young students dreamed of becoming archaeologists, inspired by Carter's tales and the allure of tombs hidden beneath the sands. In essence, Tutankhamun became a bridge between the ancient and the modern, drawing humanity closer to a long-lost world through the intimacy of personal belongings buried in silence and gold. Beyond the fame and sparkle, however, lay a quieter truth. Tutankhamun was a reflection of the vulnerabilities and contradictions of divine kingship. Egypt's ideology portrayed the pharaoh as a god in human form, an infallible intermediary between the people and the heavens. Yet Tutankhamun's life exposed the limits of that ideal. He was frail, sickly, and manipulated by others. He limped with a cane, likely endured chronic pain, and died without fulfilling the expectations of dynastic continuity. The gods were believed to protect the pharaoh, but in Tutankhamun's case, divine protection seemed absent. This contradiction did not diminish his significance. In fact, it deepened it. It made him relatable, mortal, tragic. Unlike the larger-than-life Ramesses II or the ruthlessly ambitious Thutmose III, Tutankhamun's humanity allowed modern audiences to see beyond the crown. The child behind the gold mask became a symbol of the tension between myth and reality, destiny and frailty, ceremony and suffering. In addition to spiritual matters, the tomb also reflected the complex social and economic systems of New Kingdom Egypt. The diversity of grave goods, ranging from luxurious gold to simple board games, painted a vivid picture of elite Egyptian life. Items were often symbolic. Chariots and weapons to serve the king in the afterlife, fans and staffs to show his regal power, containers for food and cosmetics to provide for his needs in eternity. But there were also deeply personal objects, like a lock of his grandmother's hair and a wooden carving of a duck, perhaps a favorite pet or totem. These objects reminded scholars that the tomb was not merely ceremonial, it was intimate. It told the story of a life with likes and dislikes, rituals and routines. It revealed the craftsmanship of artisans, the devotion of priests, and the beliefs of a people who considered the afterlife not an ending, but a continuation of earthly existence in ideal form. The tomb was a palace for eternity. The religious significance of Tutankhamun's burial was immense. Egyptians believed that death was a journey, one that required preparation, spells, protection, and offerings. The Book of the Dead, a collection of magical incantations, was often placed in tombs to guide the deceased through the challenges of the afterlife. Though no complete papyrus of this book was found in Tutankhamun's tomb, its influence was evident in the amulets, coffins, and wall paintings. His sarcophagus was nested with 3 coffins, the innermost made of solid gold and inscribed with texts invoking Osiris and other gods. These layers represented spiritual protection, a cocoon of magic to assist his transformation from human to divine. Inside the burial chamber, the walls depicted scenes of the king's transition into the afterlife, receiving the ankh from the gods, walking into eternity. These rituals were not merely symbolic. They were believed to be functional, ensuring that the pharaoh's Ka, life force, and Ba, soul, would reunite and live forever. Modern preservation efforts surrounding Tutankhamun's tomb have become a model for archaeological conservation. After decades of exposure to tourists and environmental changes, signs of deterioration began to appear in the burial chamber. Paint began flaking off the walls, and the famous golden mask suffered minor damage during cleaning attempts. In response, the Egyptian government partnered with international experts to stabilize the tomb and its contents. Temperature and humidity controls were installed, lighting was carefully managed, and new replicas were made to reduce physical strain on original items. In 2019, the newly renovated tomb was reopened with enhanced security and better visitor management systems. This reflected a broader shift in heritage conservation, away from simply excavating and showcasing, and toward protecting and sustaining. Tutankhamun's tomb, once hidden and forgotten, now stands as a testament to collaboration, science, and responsibility. It reminds the modern world that the past is not just to be admired, but to be safeguarded for future generations. The question remains: why did Tutankhamun, of all pharaohs, become the most famous? Was it merely the tomb's discovery, or something deeper? In part, it was the allure of a mystery solved, the thrill of unlocking a sealed chamber, untouched for thousands of years. But it was also the completeness of the find. Unlike other tombs, which were looted or emptied, Tutankhamun's offered a coherent narrative, a holistic view of death and divine kingship. It had continuity, integrity, and beauty. It was, in many ways, an archive of an ancient life. Moreover, his youth and obscurity made him a blank slate onto which each generation could project its own ideas. For the 1920s, he was a symbol of rediscovery. For the 1970s, he was an emblem of glamour and spectacle. For scholars, he became a case study in genetics, anthropology, and historical revisionism. For Egypt, he became a national treasure, a rallying point of identity and pride. Tutankhamun's fame, therefore, is not just historical. It is emotional, symbolic, and enduring. Finally, there's the question of Tutankhamun's own understanding of his place in history. Did he see himself as a restorer of balance? As a puppet of powerful men? As a chosen child of the gods? The archaeological record offers no diary, no direct words from the boy king himself. His voice is silent, drowned by ritual and erasure. Yet in the layers of his tomb, in the fingerprints of artisans on gold, in the carefully placed sandals by his coffin, we sense a life that mattered. Not because he ruled long, or ruled well, but because he ruled at all. In a moment of uncertainty, Tutankhamun became the vessel for a nation's recovery. In death, he became a beacon of discovery. His story is one of paradoxes: power without control, fame without intent, immortality through anonymity. And through these contradictions, he reminds us that history is not only written by the victors. Sometimes, it is preserved by accident, uncovered by persistence, and remembered because of wonder. One of the most haunting elements of Tutankhamun's story is the enigma of his sudden death and the unanswered questions surrounding his burial. Unlike other pharaohs, whose tombs were planned decades in advance, Tutankhamun's tomb was unusually small and hastily prepared. Its modest dimensions, compressed layout, and unfinished decorations strongly suggest that it was not originally meant for a king, let alone one of the 18th dynasty. Scholars believe that the tomb, now known as KV62, may have been initially intended for a noble or lesser royal figure and was quickly repurposed upon the young king's unexpected death. The evidence is compelling. Only 4 chambers instead of the grand corridors seen in other royal tombs, paintings that were still wet when the tomb was sealed, and a tightly packed array of treasures arranged in near chaos. The rushed burial, despite its rich contents, adds a shadow of urgency and secrecy to the narrative. It speaks to a royal court caught off guard and scrambling to preserve divine protocol in a time of political fragility. The nature of Tutankhamun's death has remained a mystery for nearly a century. Early theories ranged from murder by blow to the head, to political assassination, to death in a chariot crash. However, advances in modern science, particularly CT scans and DNA analysis, have provided a more grounded picture. The results suggest that the boy king suffered from multiple health problems: a clubfoot, necrosis in the bones of his left foot, a curved spine, and malaria. He walked with a cane. Dozens of them were found in his tomb, and likely struggled with chronic pain. These conditions, combined with a broken leg near the time of death and a severe malarial infection, seem to have overwhelmed his fragile body. Yet the exact cause remains uncertain. Did he fall from a chariot? Was his leg injury the result of an accident or foul play? Was the malaria already weakening him? Each possibility continues to fuel speculation, and because there is no surviving documentation or eyewitness record, Tutankhamun's final days remain clouded in silence and conjecture. The mystery surrounding his demise is only deepened by the strange anomalies found in his tomb. For instance, the famous golden mask, the centerpiece of Tutankhamun's burial, appears to have been originally crafted for someone else. Analysis of the mosque's inlaid inscriptions suggests that the name of Nefertiti, or another royal predecessor, was scraped off and replaced with Tutankhamun's cartouche. The mosque's facial features, too, seem more feminine than masculine. Such anomalies indicate that, even in death, Tutankhamun was a secondary figure, perhaps even an afterthought. Additionally, the haphazard arrangement of objects in the tomb, chairs stacked on one another, weapons placed beneath fragile linens, food jars lying broken, points to an extreme rush to completion. Wall paintings bear signs of fungal damage, likely caused by moisture from the still wet paint. These oddities, far from diminishing the tomb's significance, enhance its intrigue. They speak of a young life abruptly ended, a royal protocol disrupted, and a priesthood racing to sanctify a burial before the king's divine essence faded. Among the most captivating objects found in the tomb was the so-called meteoritic dagger, a blade made not of iron from Earth, but from the remnants of a fallen meteorite. Using X-ray fluorescence spectrometry, scientists determined that the iron contained high levels of nickel and cobalt, matching extraterrestrial signatures. This discovery stunned historians and added a new layer of mysticism to the tomb's contents. For the ancient Egyptians, iron from the heavens was considered divine and magical, and only used for the most sacred purposes. That Tutankhamun was buried with such a blade suggests an intent to arm him with celestial protection, symbolically linking him to the stars and the gods. This cosmic connection elevated his status in death, perhaps compensating for his humble stature in life. The presence of this object reveals how astronomy, divinity, and kingship were deeply intertwined in Egyptian belief systems. In a culture where the stars guided both harvests and destinies, this knife was more than a weapon, it was a passport to the afterlife. The tomb also contained 6 chariots, intricately designed and adorned with gold and leather. These chariots, though ceremonial in appearance, may have served a functional or symbolic purpose in Tutankhamun's journey through the afterlife. Some scholars argue that he was being prepared for a grand celestial battle, armed and equipped as a divine warrior. Others believe the chariots reflected his status as a living Horus, fast, fierce, and kingly, even if his real-life disabilities prevented him from ever riding them. One of the chariots shows signs of frequent use, leading to speculation that it may have played a role in a fatal accident. The presence of such vehicles, along with bows, arrows, and body armor, gives a martial tone to the burial. They suggest that even in death, Tutankhamun was to defend Egypt's cosmic order, known as Ma'at, against chaos. These items also reflect Egypt's imperial ambition during the New Kingdom, when military strength was integral to divine legitimacy and pharaohs were expected to be both priests and warriors. Equally fascinating are the everyday items found among the royal treasures. These include linen tunics, sandals, cosmetic containers, toys, and board games. Some sandals were specially made to accommodate his deformed feet, confirming his physical impairments. The presence of these personal items humanizes the boy king. He was not just a divine figure or ceremonial puppet, but a child with routines, preferences, and comforts. The Senate board, a game associated with strategy and spiritual transition, was more than entertainment. It was believed to help the deceased navigate the trials of the underworld. His cosmetics, particularly perfumed oils and kohl eyeliner, were tools of identity and divinity. Even in death, appearance mattered. Scent and image were part of spiritual purity. The linen wrappings used for his body were of the finest weave, and among them were embroidered collars, golden beads, and lotus motifs symbolizing rebirth. These items gave modern audiences insight into royal childhood, self-image, and the rituals of life that mirrored those of death. The layout of the tomb, though small, is a marvel of symbolic architecture. The antechamber, filled with furniture, chariots, and games, represented the earthly world. The annex, packed with food, oils, and wines, symbolized sustenance for the afterlife. The burial chamber, adorned with painted walls and nested coffins, was the heart of the spiritual journey, while the treasury held the most sacred objects: statues of gods, canopic shrines for his organs, and the famous Anubis shrine. The architecture followed a symbolic progression, from the mundane to the divine, the temporal to the eternal. It was a spiritual map carved into stone and treasure, guiding the king from mortality to godhood. Despite its tight confines, the tomb maintained the metaphysical geometry essential to royal burial. This spiritual precision underscored Egypt's holistic worldview, where every space had purpose, every item had meaning, and every ritual had power. The tomb, though modest in size, was monumental in symbolism. It was both a grave and a gospel, written in gold, sealed in silence. In time, the sands of the Valley of the Kings would shift, concealing Tutankhamun's tomb beneath debris from later constructions. KV-62 was lost for over 3,000 years, invisible even to grave robbers who plundered almost every other royal tomb. This unintended concealment preserved the tomb in a state of near-perfect secrecy, allowing Carter's team to encounter it almost as it was left. The tomb became an archaeological time capsule, an unbroken echo from the Bronze Age. Its preservation was not the result of design, but of fate, a divine accident. And it was this accident that allowed modern civilization to rediscover not just a king, but an entire way of life. It offered a rare lens into the most intimate spaces of ancient royalty. From carved combs to golden shrines, every artifact told a story. In each thread of linen and flake of paint, the boy king's soul still whispered, beckoning the future to remember. In that whisper, Tutankhamun was immortal. The rediscovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 by British archaeologist Howard Carter marked one of the greatest archaeological achievements in human history. Funded by Lord Carnarvon, the excavation had been ongoing for several years with minimal results until that fateful day in November. When Carter's team uncovered the stone steps leading down to a sealed door, they were unaware that they were on the verge of unearthing a treasure untouched by time. As Carter peered through a small hole into the antechamber, he was asked by Carnarvon if he could see anything. Carter famously replied, "Yes, wonderful things." That moment became etched into the historical imagination of the modern world. The chamber revealed gold-covered beds, alabaster vessels, statues of gods, and a chaotic yet dazzling array of items. Unlike other tombs that had been looted or desecrated, KV-62 was a miracle of preservation, its contents a bridge between the ancient and the modern. What lay ahead was more than treasure. It was the rebirth of a forgotten boy who would become the face of ancient Egypt. As Carter's team meticulously cataloged and documented each object, the world watched with growing fascination. Newspapers around the globe ran front-page stories about the young king, and the media dubbed him the boy pharaoh. His burial mask, with its inlaid lapis lazuli, quartz, obsidian, and pure gold, became the iconic image of Egypt's ancient grandeur. The mosque's craftsmanship was beyond comparison, a perfect fusion of art and theology, symbolizing divine radiance and eternal protection. The mask wasn't just decoration, it was a declaration of divinity. Every detail, from the false beard signifying godhood to the cobra and vulture symbolizing Upper and Lower Egypt, was part of a sacred script written in gold. This image became the ambassador of Egypt's legacy, traveling the world in exhibitions that drew millions. In many ways, the discovery of Tutankhamun did more than restore a pharaoh's memory. It reignited global passion for ancient history and redefined how modern society viewed the ancient past. The discovery also launched the legend of the so-called Curse of the Pharaohs. Shortly after the tomb's opening, Lord Carnarvon died of blood poisoning following an infected mosquito bite. His death, combined with other mysterious illnesses and accidents involving members of the expedition, fueled rumors that Tutankhamun's spirit had unleashed a curse upon those who disturbed his eternal rest. Newspapers and fiction writers ran wild with the idea, adding ghostly intrigue to the already sensational story. While modern science dismisses the idea of a literal curse, suggesting exposure to ancient mold or pathogens instead, the mythology persisted. The notion of the mummy's curse seeped into pop culture, from books and films to cartoons and conspiracy theories. It became part of the Tutankhamun mythos, reinforcing his aura as a king who transcended death. Whether myth or metaphor, the curse underscored the reverence and mystery that surrounded his tomb. It suggested that even in death, pharaohs wielded power, not just over their people, but over time itself. What is particularly fascinating about Tutankhamun's legacy is how he evolved from a relatively minor historical figure into an icon of civilization. During his own time, he was a transitional monarch, young, sickly, and manipulated by advisors. His reign saw few major conquests or constructions, and he was barely mentioned in subsequent royal lists. In fact, his successors, particularly Horemheb, erased his name and attempted to restore traditional religious and dynastic narratives that had been disrupted by Akhenaten. Tutankhamun became an absence in Egyptian memory. For millennia, he was a ghost buried in sand and silence. Yet today, his fame eclipses that of Ramses the Great or even Cleopatra. The reason lies not in what he did, but in what he left behind, a tomb full of wonder, art, and mystery. It is a paradox of history that one of Egypt's most insignificant rulers in life became its most celebrated in death. This reversal is a reminder that legacy is often not what is built, but what is preserved. The impact of the tomb's discovery was not limited to the realm of history or archaeology. It ignited an Egyptomania that swept through Western culture in the 1920s and 1930s. Tutankhamun influenced everything from architecture and fashion to jewelry and music. Art Deco designs mimicked Egyptian motifs, golden scarabs became popular amulets, and the allure of ancient magic permeated popular media. Hollywood seized upon the fascination, producing films like The Mummy that capitalized on the mystique of tombs, curses, and resurrection. Museums around the world clamored to exhibit replicas or actual pieces of Tutankhamun's artifacts. His image became a brand of cultural prestige and spiritual nostalgia. In academic circles, the discovery revolutionized Egyptology. It spurred new excavations, technologies, and funding. Egypt's own national pride surged, as the country began to reclaim its historical treasures and challenge colonial narratives. The tomb wasn't just a burial site, it became a cultural and political flashpoint, igniting debates over ownership, representation, and identity. In more recent years, scientific investigations into Tutankhamun's life and death have continued to deepen his story. CT scans conducted in the early 2000s provided a detailed look at his physical condition. DNA testing confirmed familial relationships and genetic disorders. The evidence revealed that Tutankhamun's parents were siblings, an incestuous union that was not uncommon among royal families seeking to preserve divine bloodlines. However, such unions increased the risk of genetic deformities and diseases, which may explain the frail condition of the young king. His skeletal structure showed signs of scoliosis, clubfoot, and other bone issues. He had a cleft palate and suffered from malaria multiple times. These revelations shattered earlier romantic images of Tutankhamun as a dashing warrior and replaced them with the tragic image of a suffering child king. Far from being a strong, athletic monarch, he was a fragile human being caught in the ruthless machinery of divine kingship. This humanization only made his story more compelling. He was no longer a distant god, but a boy who bore the weight of an empire. Another point of intrigue lies in the question of succession. With Tutankhamun's sudden death and no surviving heirs, the Egyptian throne passed into a period of uncertainty. His queen, Ankhesenamun, possibly wrote a letter to a Hittite king requesting to marry one of his sons, a desperate political move that defied royal custom and could have realigned Egypt's alliances. Though this Hittite prince was dispatched, he was reportedly murdered before reaching Egypt, possibly by factions loyal to the high priests or the military. Eventually, Tutankhamun's vizier and likely a power broker throughout his reign, assumed the throne, followed by the general Horemheb. Both of these men erased Tutankhamun's name from temples and records. Yet fate had other plans. While they ruled longer and more powerfully, it was Tutankhamun's tomb that endured. Their grandeur faded with time, while his humble grave sang louder across centuries. This irony is not lost on history. The forgotten boy became the eternal king, while the powerful were swallowed by the sands. Today, Tutankhamun's legacy is not confined to museums or textbooks. His golden mask continues to inspire awe in the Egyptian Museum of Cairo, while traveling exhibitions have brought his artifacts to millions across continents. His tomb remains one of the most visited sites in the Valley of the Kings, and his name is synonymous with Egypt's ancient allure. His story has become a canvas upon which modern culture paints its fascinations, be it the romance of archaeology, the fear of curses, or the tragedy of royal fate. Yet beneath all the glittering symbolism is a deeper truth. Tutankhamun's story is about the enduring power of memory. It is about how history chooses its messengers, not always by merit, but by miracle. And in that miracle, the boy who once ruled for less than a decade now reigns forever in the hearts of those who glimpse his golden gaze. He is both legend and lesson, myth and man, forgotten and immortal, all in one. As modern Egypt continues to rediscover its ancient heritage, Tutankhamun has remained a national symbol, transcending academic circles to become a figure of identity and pride. When the Grand Egyptian Museum near the Giza Pyramids opens its doors fully, it will house the complete collection of Tutankhamun's artifacts, over 5,000 items unearthed from his tomb. For the first time, these pieces will be displayed together, offering visitors a holistic view of the young king's world, his daily life, religious beliefs, political environment, and funerary journey. The museum's architectural design even reflects the reverence due to a king, with corridors and galleries mimicking the experience of walking into an ancient tomb. More than just a display, it is a pilgrimage site for historians, artists, and dreamers alike. Here, Tutankhamun becomes more than an exhibit. He becomes an enduring connection between Egypt's past and its future. Tutankhamun's legacy has also served as a mirror through which modern society reflects its evolving values and obsessions. In earlier decades, the fascination lay in the gold and the mystique, the splendor of a buried king and the thrill of a discovered tomb. But over time, focus has shifted toward understanding the human being beneath the mask. Was he happy? Did he suffer? What choices did he make, or were made for him? These questions humanize a once mythical figure, allowing modern audiences to relate to a boy from 3,300 years ago. He becomes a universal character, a child forced into adulthood, a leader crushed by tradition, a victim of political agendas, and yet a symbol of beauty, mystery, and eternity. His story is no longer just Egypt's, it belongs to the world. In the digital age, Tutankhamun's presence has found new forms of expression. Virtual reality tours of his tomb allow people from across the globe to experience the thrill Carter must have felt in 1922. 3D scans and forensic reconstructions present highly accurate depictions of what the young pharaoh may have looked like in life. Social media hashtags, documentaries, podcasts, and video games continue to keep his legend alive. His story has even influenced science fiction and fantasy, serving as the inspiration for characters in everything from comic books to Hollywood blockbusters. Whether in a classroom, a gallery, or a tweet, Tutankhamun remains vibrant in the cultural bloodstream of humanity. His name, once erased from temple walls, now echoes across satellites and screens. But what deeper lessons can we draw from the saga of Tutankhamun? Perhaps it is the realization that legacy is not merely built by power, but by memory. Tutankhamun was not a great warrior or a master builder. He did not unite kingdoms or write philosophy. He ruled for less than a decade, most likely under the shadow of elder advisors. Yet because his story was hidden, untouched, and eventually revealed with such drama and richness, it struck a chord that still resonates. It reminds us that history is not only made by the mighty, but sometimes by the mute. It tells us that buried truths can one day outshine public monuments. And it teaches us that even a short, fragile life can become an eternal flame in the pages of time. There is also something to be said about the intersection of myth and science in Tutankhamun's legacy. For every scientific breakthrough about his health, genetics, and artifacts, there exists a parallel stream of wonder, the inexplicable aura that surrounds him. Why did this one tomb survive looting for thousands of years? Why did his memory endure despite being systematically erased? Why does the image of his golden mask stir something deep and primal in the human imagination? These questions don't always have rational answers, nor do they need them. Tutankhamun's story lives in that space where archaeology meets art, where reason meets reverence. He is not just an object of study, he is a symbol of how mystery fuels meaning. In the end, Tutankhamun's greatest achievement may not lie in what he did while alive, but in what his death preserved. His tomb was not built to be famous, it was designed to guard a soul's journey into eternity. Yet in doing so, it became the gateway for millions of people to step into Egypt's ancient world. For many, their first encounter with pharaonic history begins with his name. For Egyptologists, his artifacts offer decades of scholarship. For Egypt, he is a cultural treasure. And for the world, he is proof that the past never truly dies, it simply waits to be rediscovered. The boy king, once forgotten, now rules forever, not from a throne of stone, but from the hearts of those who continue to seek, wonder, and remember. So as we look upon the golden mask, as we read his name etched in hieroglyphs, as we walk through the corridors of his tomb or the halls of a museum, we are reminded of a simple truth. Some stories, once unearthed, change the world. And Tutankhamun's story is one of them. A child once lost to history now teaches us about fragility, mystery, memory, and the immortality that comes not from conquest, but from curiosity. Long live the boy king. Long live the silent pharaoh who spoke across millennia, and was finally heard.